Bonjour, good afternoon, mesdames et messieurs. Thank you for joining us today for Score Salvations, the art of saving soundtracks, a special panel discussion with the dream makers behind La La Land Records, people who truly make cinephile dreams come true, one of the greatest soundtrack album restorationist teams that you could ever hope to hear from. And this panel will also include a number of noteworthy composers. To kick things off, it is a pleasure to introduce to you your moderator for this afternoon, Concordia Film Professor Randolph Jordan.
Thanks, Mitch. Yeah, so it's a great pleasure to be here moderating this panel today. I teach cinema here in Fantasia's hometown of Montreal. And this is a timely session. I'm just fine-tuning my syllabus for a course this fall on film sound. And also this is the first year that Fantasia is offering an award for Best Score as part of the Cheval Noir competition. So this is a great thing that's happening now. Before I forget, I just want to give a shout out to JF Francois, who's running our tech very smoothly for us in all these panels and is helping to make all of this possible. And so what I'm going to do, I think we got quite a few people here. I'm going to run through the set of introductions, give you some brief biographical info on everybody here, and then we'll be free to have the discussion go where it may. So as Mitch mentioned, the focus today is the La La Land Records label, independent soundtrack label based in Burbank, California. And so two of our panelists here are president and co-owners of the company, M.V. Gerhard and Matt Verbois. Since its founding in 2002, La La Land has released more than 500 film and television soundtrack titles from across the genre spectrum. Numerous deluxe soundtrack box sets, including the original Star Trek TV scores, beloved film music to the Friday the 13th, Planet of the Apes, and Harry Potter franchises. Definitive presentations of classic scores from John Williams, James Horner, Jerry Goldsmith, many others. And they have honed an acclaimed specialty within the realm of limited edition score expansion and restoration projects. The label is also a producer of the Larry Cohen documentary King Cohen that ran here at Fantasia, won the Fantasia Fest Audience Award, in fact, in 2017. And I looked really hard for my signed copy of the poster that I got that night, but I can't find it. It's rolled up in a tube somewhere. Anyway, so we've got those two heading up La La Land Records. Then we've also got Jeff Bond, author of a lot of books, including Danse Macabre, 25 Years of Danny Elfman and Tim Burton, the music of Star Trek, the fantasy worlds of Irwin Allen. He's also written hundreds of soundtrack album liner notes, including booklets for over 85 releases on the music of Jerry Goldsmith alone. He's worked as a producer also for La La Land Records on releases of Leonard Rosenman's music to the film Fantastic Voyage, on the complete release of the music from the 1966 Star Trek series, releases of music from other TV shows, Land of the Giants and Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. Neil S. Balk is with us. He's also a soundtrack producer, freelance, but he has done several projects with La La Land Records, produced or co-produced numerous of their things, including Danny Elfman's score to Batman, Star Trek again, the original series soundtrack collection, two expanded James Bond albums with David Arnold, and John Barry's Oscar-winning score for Dances with Wolves. His recent releases include The Karate Kid, Casper, and The Swarm. And in addition to working with La La Land Records, he's also worked on soundtrack releases for Film Score Monthly, Intrada, Kritzerland, Mondo, Quartet Records, Twilight Time, Varese, Sarabande, and Walt Disney Records. Next, we've got Mike Matazzino, a top independent soundtrack producer, preservationist, and film historian and annotator. He's worked with Nick Redman at 20th Century Fox on soundtracks since the 1990s. Currently, he's producing all of the Universal Studios film music classic releases there. He handles all of John Williams' catalog reissues and restorations, many of which have been released by La La Land, and has worked on a number of live-to-picture concerts, among other projects. He's also worked for Robert Wise for 10 years and was the post-production supervisor for him on the director's edition of Star Trek: The Motion Picture. Next up, Dan Goldwasser, for 2 decades, has been involved with the film music industry as a producer of soundtrack albums, art director, photojournalist, and web designer. He was an original co-founder of Soundtrack.net and currently runs ScoringSessions.com, which is now the premier internet destination for live orchestra photography. And he's also worked on over 200 albums for film, television, and video games, including Airplane, Blazing Saddles, The Fugitive, Matrix Reloaded, Braveheart, Beverly Hills Cop, Titanic, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, Bram Stoker's Dracula, and The Orville. And then rounding things out, we have 2 distinguished composers with us. We have Joe Kramer, whose recent credits include one of my favorite Fantasia films from a few years back, The Man Who Shot Hitler and Then the Bigfoot. Also scored several of Christopher McQuarrie's films, including Jack Reacher, Mission Impossible, Rogue Nation. He's currently writing music for the CW television series Pandora, and other projects featuring his music include the King Cohen film, Kindred Spirits, The Way of the Gun, and the TV series Comrade Detective, Creeped Out, and Femme Fatale, and more than 20 Doctor Who audio adventures for Big Finish Productions. And last, certainly not least, Henry Manfredini, composer of a couple hundred film scores, including those for the Friday the 13th series. And so La La Land did a big Friday the 13th box set a while back. Only 1,300 copies made, long sold out. But the releasing saga for that franchise continues. So I thought maybe we could start our discussion today around that. If maybe want to talk about what some of the challenges were. I've heard the release, that big box set release, described as miraculous. And so maybe if you want to talk about some of the challenges, the particular challenges of getting that stuff out finally, and we can go from there.
I think on Michael and it was always something that we had wanted to do when we started the company, but it was always the kind of thing where people would ask us about it. And we were like, as far as we know, the elements aren't there to do it. So it wasn't until years after we were already established that I believe Harry contacted us, right? Somebody.
Yeah, I want to say it was.
We ended up at Lionsgate.
It was at a Fangoria convention, right? There was a panel at
right.
No, it was at Lionsgate.
Right. It was at Lionsgate, and I'm trying to remember how because the wonderful thing, and it's wonderful when this happens, Harry owns the publishing, he owns that music, but Paramount obviously is released the films and owns the art and everything else and that property. But why were we at Lionsgate? They wanted to do.
We were at Lionsgate. We started out at Lionsgate with the first meeting there was, you guys weren't there.
No.
They wanted to release one single CD.
Compilation.
That's right.
That's right. And I said, well, I don't have these elements, and I don't have this stuff. Well, they said, well, we have some stuff, and we can put it together. And I'm going like, really? I mean, what? I don't understand what what this is for you. Oh, well, this is what we want to do. And Matt, by the way, Sony actually owns the publishing.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah, that's right.
Anyway,
at least that's where I send the checks.
Right.
Yeah, my mistake.
You're sending them checks? Hey. All right.
But you can control basically who gets to do something with it.
So another meeting was called, and you two guys popped up at that meeting.
Yes,
and, that's right.
Right.
Like cockroaches.
And I'm sitting there, and I'm going like, oh, La La Land. Yeah, I know you guys. You guys put on great albums. So I don't know which one of you said, yeah, but we want to put out an album of like all the music.
That's right. You guys were talking compilation. I think John Tempero, your agent manager, was there, and you were like, "Well, what do you want to do?" And we were like, "No, we want to do all of it.
Want to do
all
like
of it,
everything,
every note that existed in Francis Berkeley." And I'm going like, I don't know what you're smoking, but
That was pretty good stuff at the time.
right. Well, anyway, I'm going like, I said, I have no idea how you're going to do that. And somehow or other, you guys, or you knew somebody at Paramount in the archive section, and I was sent.
Yeah.
They said, well, we can get you all the music. Yeah. And I'm going, so great. So I go
It was all about the timing because we were working with Lionsgate on projects like
That's right.
And
right,
Punisher.
it was perfect. Evidently, it was perfect timing.
Yeah.
So what was fun about it was I got to go to Paramount to the archive building,
Yeah.
which is like a museum. I mean, you're walking through the hall and you're seeing like props and costumes and all kinds of stuff. That was amazing. Anyway, so I go into this little office. Who's the guy, the music guy there at the archives? I forget his name. But
David Suk.
I'm sorry?
David Suk.
Maybe. That doesn't
The guy I deal with at the archives.
Anyway, the other guy's probably fired. Anyway, so
Incredible.
I walk in and here are all these boxes and 24-track tapes and things, all sorts of things. And I think they had recently released the first 6 DVDs. So they had done a remix or something. So anyway, so I said, well, what do you have? I said, I said, if you think I'm going to take those 24 tracks and go to find a 24-track player of tapes, which they're probably so dry they would explode when you put them on the machine. Oh, no. We've got the Pro Tools files for every one of these. And I'm going, oh, cool. I said, well, can I have them? And he said, no. I said, could I have a copy? And he goes, yes. He said, well, we'll make me a copy. Oh, no, you can't. We won't make you a copy. You've got to come with a hard drive, spend the whole day with someone, and we'll just, transfer them over. I'm going, cool. So literally, I went there. They transferred every single file over to the hard drive. And then I went back to y'all with Neil and Matt and
Where we grabbed a nice slice of taste.
And we had a slice of taste. That's an in joke about a diner that no longer exists, but evidently they couldn't spell toast. Lots of toast, you got a slice of taste. Anyway, and there it was. We finally had literally every note from first 6 Friday.
Every key, ma.
Including.
And that was Neil. Did James Nelson mastered that, right?
James mastered that. Yeah, I went through the stems and cut it all up. I remember.
That's right. Yeah, that was a masterly job, and a nasty job. And there's a cat. There's a cat that's appearing over your shoulder, which is really cool. Or something. There's an animal behind you, Neil.
Harry, can you explain where ha 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 came from? Like
Really?
Everyone wants to know that, right? That story.
No one's ever heard this before, but I'll tell you right now. In the
You haven't heard it today.
Right, you haven't heard it today. Well, the problem with the music in this movie was that you never saw the killer until like reel 9, and my problem dramatically was, how do I make the killer appear when it's POV of the killer? There was a lot of that. So there's a scene at the very end where Betsy Palmer, there's a close-up of her mouth and she's going, "Killer mommy, and it goes back and forth between her voice and Jason's voice. So I just sort of went, she's hearing voices. And I had been studying Penderecki at the time, and I just thought K was a very sharp sound. So I went up to a mic and went, and then mommy, I went, and we ran it through a digital, echo repeat, and it came out. So every time it was POV of the killer. And we decided early on that I was only going to put music for the killer. The rest of the movie would be without music. So you knew that every time that happened, it was the killer. And what's cool about it, and I think part of the success, is that the music actually became a character in the movie.
Yeah.
Besides,
So much so that,
besides just the score, it became somebody. So
yeah, I mean,
that's
your theme is so iconic. It's on the level of, what Williams did with Star Wars and Ifukube with Godzilla. It spans so many films.
Or Jaws or something like that.
It truly is. It's the only film franchise I know of that when you look at conventions or even signings, it's the only film franchise I know of where like the composer's a bigger star than the cast. Like it's because you did all those films, they identify with you. They identify with the music because the music has been that production value constant.
I'm a bigger star than Harry Lehman. Come on.
Yeah, I say yeah. I mean, and for us, it's fun if there's a signing because we don't do many signings where we see masks and machetes and an oar. My favorite was some guy who came with a rowboat oar.
Yes, I signed an oar. I remember that.
There'll be a lot of masks at future signings.
Yeah, and probably a snake. That's the last thing. I haven't signed a snake. So I hope that helped. That answer, did that help?
Thank you. I'm
Yeah,
the last
we've
person
been
in America to
excited
learn that.
release. Yeah, we're excited to have released them separately now that the set is long sold out. And
working on number 7 right now with what you and Fred Mullen did. So that'll be out sometime in October.
That's the plan. It's coming along.
Yeah.
We're 80% there.
Cool. I noticed with interest on IMDb that in addition to being credited with music on all the films that you scored, Harry, you're also credited on one of the later Friday the 13th films in the sound department for the use of that sound associated with the killer. So it's slipped over into a new realm.
I jumped genres, as they say.
Right. Yeah. So I don't know, maybe if MV, if you two want to talk about Matt and MV, if you want to talk about what got you started in this business in the first place, how the La La Land records came together in the early days, that kind of thing.
We were looking for fortune and glory for first off, so
we thought, how can we get filthy rich? It must be limited edition soundtrack restorations. No, Michael and I were friends for quite a while, and I was working, doing some development for some independent producers, not score related, but they wanted to expand a little bit what they were doing because they were film score fans. And Michael was working for GMP Crescendo Records, and I knew he had, but you were doing all kinds of stuff there.
Oh yeah, I had started working on some. As a production assistant with Ford Thaxton and Mark Banning, who were there, who we work with now, as a matter of fact, on a number of projects. But,
And so I knew that Michael had his fingers in there. And so we had a meeting with the people I was working with. Michael introduced me and everybody to Ford Thaxton and Mark Banning, and both of them still produce with us today and do wonderful work, along with James Nelson. And we did a couple for anybody out there that sort of knows a little bit of our history or has some of our older releases. We did the first crack we did at Day of the Dead. We subsequently released it again with a big expanded, a 2 CD set. But we did that. We did the Savini, Dark Crystal and Savini, right? And that was Numenorian, and then we decided, that we had a handle on it ourselves and wanted to make a go of it ourselves. So in 2002, we started doing that with the dream of just sort of staying in business.
Richard Band actually was the first composer we really reached out to, Reanimator and From Beyond.
That's right.
That's like we are. There was just a breadth of horror soundtracks that haven't been out there or haven't been presented properly. So we kind of dipped our toes in those waters, and that's how we met Harry. As a matter of fact, through Richard at the Fangoria panel. That's what I'm thinking.
That's right.
That was our first encounter with Harry. And
That's
then
right.
meeting happened thereafter. But yeah, from there we just started, things started, snowballing, and we lucked out literally with the flip of a coin, getting the Battlestar Galactica franchise, the newer incarnation.
Yeah.
And that really helped put us on the map. And
Yep, that put us on the map in a mainstream sense, and we had done some
record
movies.
stores still existed too.
Yeah,
That's the
and
thing.
then people were still people were still buying stuff at Borders and Tower Records, so that was successful for us. And then we came to know Lucas Kendall and Mike Matessino, and that led to Nick Redman, who unfortunately passed not too long ago, but was very instrumental in us also stepping up our game, and Dan Goldwasser helping us getting into Paramount. And so just year after year, it just kept sort of moving along.
Yeah, exactly. And then striking up relationships with various composers like Harry and like Joe. And, Tyler Bates helped us get into Warner Brothers with this score for 300 because we did Devil's Rejects with him. So, it was all about building these connections and working with, Bear McCreary, who's an amazing composer.
Yeah.
We can say we knew him when. So it's been an exciting ride. We've been doing it for 18 years now. Mm-hmm. We can now vote. So that's good. It's a good year to start that. We are, 550 titles just about?
Yeah, just about.
So
it's been
far.
It's you look back and you realize that you did some every couple of weeks for 18 years. It adds up.
Yeah, and some dream projects like the Friday box set. I mean, that was certainly in our top 10. I know X-Files was something I always wanted to tackle and release properly. Batman the Animated Series. One of Matt's favorites is The In-Laws by the late great John Morris, and working with John Morris and Mel Brooks. I mean, come on.
Thank you to the 40 people that bought The In-Laws. I'm indebted to you. Thank you very much.
And thank you to the 50 people who bought Last Boy Scout, which was one of my personal favorites.
But that's the part that's so fulfilling, is to go back and especially anybody that grew up during the 60s, 70s, and 80s into the 90s, to go back and sort of fulfill those holy grails that you have, scores that were never released complete or were never released before, or could be made to sound incredibly, robust and new again. That's worth the whole thing.
Yeah, and to me, things came full circle when we got to do for our 10th anniversary the Star Trek box set, which was 15 CDs, basically every note of music, recorded for Star Trek. And I got to go back to the company that I worked for in the mailroom and cut them a huge check for their portion of the soundtracks that they actually controlled to the episodes. So it was kind of surreal, 10 years later to do that. And if
we're very glad that sold, because there would have been no panel otherwise.
Yes.
Everything was on that. That was a massive.
We would have been panhandling, not doing a panel.
Right. As Jack, Lucas and Neil.
Here's a question from a panel guy. When did you guys find James for your mastering?
That was Fort Thaxton.
Yeah. James was working with Ford on a number of projects over at Crescendo and Sonic Images.
I'll tell you, that's one of the secrets that you guys have discovered, and I think it's James, in that, I mean, especially on Friday, 13 guys in a basement in New Jersey, and just trying
that sounds ominous.
12 of them alive. Yeah. It just sounds ominous that you're doing it as fast as you can on the lowest possible budget, and this guy gets a hold of these raw recordings, which we mixed the best we could, but man, when we got finished with it, I went, wow, this guy, he is a genius. So
we're blessed. I mean,
what James and Neil managed to pull out of their amazing ears, amazes me.
And then what Mike Matessino's been doing with Superman, the feedback we're getting is like that score has never sounded. No release of that score has sounded like that.
Right.
So, Michael and I we're privileged to just sort of be working with, Bruce Botnick and Mike Matessino and Chris Malone and James Nelson. I mean, they're really the best of what they do. They're the best of the best.
And I'll tell you, whoever wrote the music surely appreciates it. I'll tell you that. Not sure about that John Williams.
We appreciate the well-written music.
We do. That kind of all starts there, right?
Yeah.
So
this is probably a good time to maybe talk a little bit about what the process of producing a soundtrack is actually like, because you're using words like mixing and mastering, but not everybody knows what that's all about, right? You think, oh, you recorded a score, can't you just slap it, to a disc and release? Not so easy, right?
Some studios think that you can do that.
Yeah, you just copy of this.
So maybe some of you who have your hands in the production side could chime in on like what's the first step if you want to get a score produced, and at least if you know where the elements are, right?
Well, assuming that MV and Matt actually go ahead and make the deal with the controlling entities, be it a record label or a studio or a combination of both, which is a whole separate subject, which adds a layer of complexity to it. You then,
just a little
identifying what does exist and what can we use, and you have to look at what else was out there. Are there soundtracks that have already existed? Were there different incarnations of them? And then, God help us, were there bootlegs? Were there things like isolated scores ever on a DVD or a Laserdisc? Were there things just sort of floating around in private collections? So it's a lot of it's archaeology. There's a big part of it, I think, that's archaeology. And putting everything together, listening to it, actually comparing it to the movie to hear what's going on. Was the album different than what the movie was? So there's a lot of it. There's a lot of that happens. And then just once you make decisions about what to use, you then just figure out how to best assemble it and how to make it sound as good as it can. For me, I like to try to go for something that's a sort of complete, satisfying experience that just plays as a sort of a unified whole, has as much of the scenes addressed as you possibly can to smooth them over and just make it as unified and consistent as possible, which, at the end of the day is all about making the composer look good and making all of the people that go into the recording, the original recording sessions and the players and the mixing and editing decisions that are done at that time. You try to carry through the integrity of that all the way through to a finished presentation where the music can stand on its own. And it's really the only component of a movie that can stand on its own as a separate creative experience. And that's sort of what's driven this whole business for many, many decades.
Yeah, it's interesting because, so often the music, the score that's composed for a film, when you hear it in the film, it sounds so different than what ends up on a soundtrack album because it's being cut often, without the composer's consent even, or at least not the way it was intended because it needs to fit with the scenes. It's blended with all these other sound elements and everything. So is it the norm, would you say, at least with the work that you guys do, like you say, that you want the album to be able to stand on its own, which might mean that it's actually not reflecting entirely the way it's heard in the film?
I think that my answer to that would be that this is really just, it sounds like a cop-out, but it's actually true. Every single title is a unique case. You have to just, no matter what the movie is, you have to figure out what is really best for that particular title, and it varies. So there's not sort of one formula you can apply across the board. If you were to pick specific titles, we could sort of tell you what the approach was. But a lot of it just, it's all a matter of context and what's right for each individual title. Every title's really different.
Right.
But there is sort of a, you sort of look at it and go, what was the intention? What were they going for? Because, when we did Titanic, with all the material that I had on Titanic, and this is something I never, ever, ever get, but for some reason we got this on Titanic. We had the sessions that were the final dub sessions for the music, and I could see every single music edit that was done. and the thing was chopped up. I mean, it was cut, and it was like, this is no way to put an album together. But then when we did the research and we listened to the original album, and we could see that what the intent was, and we could sort of go, yes, this is what was intended for the movie, not necessarily how it was shoehorned into the picture, which, by the way, works really well and got James Horner an Oscar nomination. But
I think a win, didn't it?
For a CD release, it was like, he won the award for that, didn't he?
Yes.
Titanic, yeah.
Yeah.
So it was like, yeah, we can't put out this choppy thing. It's here for reference. I can look at it, but I could certainly never ever make a CD out of that. Nor I don't think you guys would want that.
Well, and I know Joe, actually, this is one of his little pet peeves, was that ultimate collector's edition of The Phantom Menace, which essentially was the editor's cut for, you know, all the chops and everything. Joe talked about that.
Almost single-handedly.
It was an isolated score track.
Yeah, that release in 1999 almost single-handedly destroyed the major labels doing expansions, because that release was not what it should have been, nor was it advertised as what they were saying it was. They were saying it's every note composed, and it wasn't at all. In fact, the original album had material on it that was not on this one. When it didn't sell too well for Sony Classical, they basically got out of the business. Just less than a year later, we had the first expanded version of Superman, which charted, went on the classical crossover charts. And that was really the ending of it. The major labels got out of that. And that's what opened up the boutique, so-called boutique or third-party labels coming in and doing this. The next step that made that the viable way to go was in 2004, when you had two major studios, Universal and Warner Brothers, both divest themselves of the music branches of their companies. And what that did is it split the ownership of the music. So you might say have a 2-hour score. The album was 1 hour. And now after 2004, you have Warner Music Group, Universal Music Group owning that hour, and the unreleased hour still owned by the studio. Only with a third party coming in could somebody say, okay, I'll license this hour from you, that hour from you, and then we'll put the score together in the way that the composer intended, and expand it out and actually hear everything that we want to hear. Because a lot of times we come away from the movies and our memories are sort of anchored on what we hear musically. And when you don't have that particular piece of music, you just always want it. I still to this day really can't fathom how you do a 2 LP set of Superman and leave off the helicopter scene. But that's what happened in 1978. So it was 20 years until we finally got it on an official release. So so there's that aspect of it. And just to bring it back to the idea of the music itself, when it's presented, it actually becomes its own narrative. So when you have things like in the case of Titanic, a lot of the music, going back to the presentation of how Horner originally recorded it, usually that's reflective of what state the movie was in editorially at the time of scoring. It actually becomes a narrative experience into itself, and you can now get rid of the imagery and the acting and the dialogue and all of that, and just actually experience the story musically. And that's just a very magical thing, and that's why it's always so satisfying when we have something that's
teenage girls were having listening parties. I was going to say that when Titanic came out, their teenage girls were just having listening parties of James Horner's score.
Which is, yeah, it's just an astounding idea.
Yeah.
That's what we were in 1997.
So how do you know this, Michael?
he was there.
Yeah, I got around.
Okay, all right.
Maybe the composers, Joe, you haven't said much yet, can speak to this difference in wanting your score to be able to stand alone versus function well in the movie. Obviously, it's destined for the movie. It needs to function that way. But how much do you think about like the soundtrack album, you know, and thinking about that experience on its own when you're composing?
Well, for me, the album, to me, Alien is a great example because the movie really reflects what Scott thought the musical story should be. And the album, even the original LP, was really Goldsmith's vision for what it should be. And I've sort of adopted that model. So in the case of like Jack Reacher, the director pulled a lot out of the score as I was writing it. And on Mission, I sort of was a little more protective of the music. And so the music that went in the movie was sort of what the director wanted. And then what I put on the CD were versions of the cues that I thought were more interesting to listen to. You know, for example, the very opening of the movie where Simon Pegg pops up out of the grass, there was a little melody I'd written based on Lalo Schifrin's theme called The Plot. And the director took all the notes out and just made it one note in like a staccato rhythm, which for the movie, you know, that's his purview. I look at my work the same way an actor, I think, looks at their performance, which is like turn in the best work I can, and then it's up to the filmmakers to make it work with the movie they want to make. But the album, I sort of feel like, is mine to express what I wanted to express. And sometimes those are in sync, by the way, like in The Man Who Killed Hitler and then The Bigfoot. You know, the score on the CD is almost identical to the way it is in the movie. The only difference was I moved a few things around so that very similar pieces of music weren't necessarily right next to each other.
Right.
You know, you didn't end up with a big sort of saggy middle with big action on either side, you know?
Yeah.
And then sometimes from the label perspective, it's like we need to honor that with the composer, but we may also know that there's been a history of requests, particularly for something, you know, and sometimes we'll have a conversation there to include things that maybe, you know, wouldn't have been included initially, or, but anyway, all these things factor in.
Yeah, I totally agree with Joe. For example, on Deep Star 6 and Swamp Thing, I created what became the CD, basically taking the score. I mean, typically, let's say you have 4 scenes in a row, which may have 6 pieces of music, which transition into each other, and it goes up, it goes down, but it in a way, it's a sequence of a story. And what I would do was I would do the editing and the chopping as opposed to the film editor chopping, but I would bring them together in a listenable, musically logical story of 4.5 minutes. And so you're sort of getting the whole score without, you know, when you're wandering around under dialogue or something, I don't think musically that's that interesting. So I would move that up and keep pulling it together until it became a straight line. And I think that's what Joe's talking about as well. And forget about taking stems out. And if they want to do that, that's up to them. But that's not what I wrote. I mean, the stem is a piece of the score. But that's, I mean, and that's what that from the composer's point of view, when you get a chance to do that, it's really nice, because then you get the idea of what we're trying to do, you know, just condensed without all that, you know, boring dialogue and Foley and stuff like that covers us up anyway, you know. And that's all I have to say about that.
So I will say real quick, like as a listener, I'm probably unusual in that I tend to want to listen to scores as sort of records or archives of the writing. So, because I want to study how the writing progresses. So, for example, E.T. is very interesting to me to listen to chronologically, because Williams sort of constructed the entire score as a sort of build up to that moment when they go off the cliff and start riding the flying theme in front of the moon.
Right.
And, you know, to hear how he develops the motif with what he calls, you know, the siren call or the signature call, and then hints at the flying theme, but doesn't give it to you in full till then. Whereas on the original soundtrack, I think it was track 2, you know? Yeah. So I like to be able to study that writing process and the development.
Good point, Joe.
And that's an interesting one because of the architecture of the score, but it's one where Williams wanted to actually wrote the ending first. and has always said that that's actually best, because then you can sort of go back and plan how you're going to get
You know where you're going.
He wrote the ending first, and it was the first thing recorded as well. And that's you know, that idea of having this big puzzle in your mind and you're just working on it a tiny bit of a piece each day over a period of weeks, but then you end up with the complete whole. But then the album becomes only kind of half the picture. So, and it's all valid. Certainly the albums that get created, and especially the ones that become very successful, that's all very, very valid. But again, as I said before, people have memories of films attached to music because, you know, it leaves an impression and therefore it secures your memory of something, and then you want it. You want to hold on to it. So if a very prominent piece of music is missing, people do want it. So, and that's just that's a small piece of what we do.
I think another great example of this is the Blue Max, which we worked on a few years ago, and which every time I go back to the film, I forget how butchered that score is in the movie. It's barely even in the movie, but its reputation is one of the greatest film scores of all time. It's, you know, mentioned by Steven Spielberg and Joe Dante and people when they talk about how they kind of first got to know Jerry Goldsmith, and it really only got its reputation because there was a soundtrack LP put out at the time that included all these huge pieces of music that Goldsmith wrote that were thrown out of the movie. And when we wound up doing it, you know, Neil and Mike managed to assemble all of the kind of dry runs and the, you know, different versions of cues that Goldsmith had to write with a gun to his head, because the director and producer basically just loved his main theme, the opening of the movie, and wanted him to keep repeating that throughout the movie, although he'd written all this incredible, dark, you know, heavy battle music. And they wound up throwing it out. He you know, created this whole incredible classical structure for a lot of this battle music, and once you pulled some of that out, you really had no idea what he was trying to achieve. And so in addition to that original LP that gave people an idea of some idea of what he was trying to do, you know, with the version that we put out, you know, we had all these different versions of different cues, just showing Goldsmith kind of beating his head against the wall and trying to make this director happy. So you wound up with another kind of almost like another half of a score written, and you really got to see kind of the thought process and the challenges, you know, put in front of an incredible composer, you know, working on this movie. It gives you a real weird photo of the process, you know, a composer goes through on something like this.
Well, the Blue Max actually goes back to what Mike was saying earlier about how we gather all the material to do the archaeology to figure out what it is. And the Blue Max had so many releases. I mean, that's a score that had an expanded release on vinyl because it had the original soundtrack on mainstream in '66. And then in the '70s, an album came out with more music on it with completely different titles. And then there were 3 other CD releases of the score. So then La La Land said, "Hey, we're doing the Blue Max." And I'm like, well, what is there to possibly do? This is going to be the 6th release of the thing. But when you took all those records, and we got the records and we got the CDs and we put them all in Pro Tools, and then we could line everything up and visually look and see, well, this record had this CD had this, and then you could sort of piece it all together and go, oh, okay, we could sort of reconstruct and see the intention again, and make sure all of our bases are covered because we have all the records here and we can see what was done. If you have the La La Land Blue Max, you can actually program a playlist to play any of the 5 earlier releases of the score. You can do that. We designed it that way. You can put it in and push play and hear the score, or you can rebuild your own.
And to those who ask how many times you're going to put this out, the answer is until we get it right.
Yeah. Neil has, and Mike too, they both have these great kind of holographic minds that can actually keep all of these different pieces of these puzzles together and understand how they fit together. You know, Neil is constantly yelling at me because I don't have that kind of mind, and he's like, you know, you're talking about the wrong take of, you know, M32, and I'm like, but you mean what music that's playing when this guy gets shot? It's like that's how I see it. I see it in relation to the movie, or just how it fits together as a piece of music. But you know, Mike and Neil understand all the nuts and bolts of this just incredibly complicated process of recording and organizing all of these different takes that, you know, to assemble into this whole.
Well, I think it's one of the great advantages of the digital revolution that started in the 90s, because this really wouldn't be possible except for now, as Neil said, you can actually put them all in one place. You can even actually see them in waveforms. You don't even really have to listen. You could tell if something's different or something's longer or shorter, or the speed is off or something, or an edit happens. There's a lot that you can sort of, you know, kind of a hearing impaired person can do just by physically seeing it on a screen in front of you and working with it all in one place in a non-linear way. That's what sort of made all this possible. Whereas, say, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, you actually just have to listen and say, is that right? I don't know. I mean, we'll have to put it up and see if it sounds right. But now we can actually tell if it syncs, and we can do the speed adjustments and all that to get it as perfect as it possibly could be. Because as you have these multiple releases, they all change. Everybody makes different decisions. There's assumptions made, or they make up titles where, in fact, we can actually find out what the real manuscript titles were. So it's a process. We sometimes find new material, things we're missing, and can we put it out again and just add another lost cue? Sometimes we actually have done that. But you hope that eventually you reach the point where you found everything there is to find, and you presented it as good as it's ever going to be presented, and you have one that'll just stand for all time. But again, it's not to say that it invalidates all the previous ones. It's just that if you're going to do it again, you try to get it right. And that's sort of my mantra on any project. I always act like this is the only opportunity anybody's ever going to get to work on this. So let's get it right.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to add is from the composer side, is when you're on a film, very often you start out very organized and you're keeping excellent track of everything. And then as a composer, and then as the deadline gets closer and closer, things start getting more and more frantic, and decisions start getting made with less and less documentation. So that by the time you get to the final day of the mix, you're taking stuff from scene one and plopping it in scene two, or if you're at the recording session, you're recording stuff and you're dictating changes from the podium if you're doing an orchestra, and nothing's written down. And at least in the tape world, if you did a bunch of takes in a row, you knew how things progressed. With digital files, that isn't always, it isn't always possible to keep track of that in the same way. And when people wonder, well, how come there's this 4-second bar missing from Return of the Jedi or Harry Potter 3 or whatever, and they think, well, this is the most important thing in the world. Why aren't people keeping track of this while they're doing it? And it's like, you're just trying to get the job done to get the movie out the door, and it's not that stuff gets lost, but like, for example, on Mission, we had a cue that was take 43, or take 34, but somebody made a typo, and it was take 43 in the computer, and we just didn't find it. And then it wasn't until somebody else pointed out, hey, didn't we record an alt for that scene, that we were like, oh yeah, and we went and found it and put it in the mix. But, it's not that we don't care, but it's just, you're in such a rush to get the thing done and make everybody happy, so.
I don't think most people realize how many post-production people and musicians and people involved in the music are actually driving to work to get the movie done while they're passing billboards that advertise the release with a date on it.
That's so true.
And I don't think people realize how often, like, the nanny is the one giving music notes, the nanny of the director's kids, or the assistant of the producer are giving music notes, and you're having to sort of make changes, and that's part of the process. It's funny when it's all over. When you're in the middle of it, you want to pull all your hair out. That's why I'm bald now. But
I have to congratulate all of us, because there has not been one off-color word in this entire.
It's not over yet.
Oh, Harry,
But
here we go.
Come on, man.
Just to
We were all so good.
Just to start the ball rolling, back what Joe was saying, and the same thing with Mike was saying, is that, this digital stuff is just fantastic. We can do amazing things. We can make this cue sound better, and we can do this, and we can do that. On the other side of that digital stuff that we can do is the director and the editor sitting in a room constantly frame fucking up.
See.
Can everyone write that down? Frame
I'll
fucking.
tell you, earlier,
In art, I use the term pixel fucking, so it's the same idea.
All right,
Let's
so
hashtag
fine.
that, please.
So
Taking
anyway,
notes.
what I'm saying is that by the time you've written this cue to what you were looking at home, that picture may have changed 12 times, and there's stupid little changes. Like, oh, we took 3 frames out of this, and but we put 3 frames back in later, so nothing should really change. And I'm going like, well, yeah, overall length, nothing has changed. However, like, all the music is like, oh, and then we put 2 here, and then we moved 1, and like 1 frame, a 24th of a second is so critical to the the dialogue scene about your mother's funeral or something. I don't know. Anyway, so there's that digital part of the good stuff for us. Sometimes has that ugly part.
well,
And-
because it did actually open a Pandora's box, right? Didn't
Right,
it? Because you
exactly.
used to be content
Right.
years ago with 3-4 takes, and you'd find a master take, and maybe a couple inserts. But now they have to do an edit to a different take every 3-4 bars. So
Right.
there are
Right.
fewer edits in E.T. from 1982. Than there are of the entire score, than there are in just Hedwig's theme from Harry Potter, which had 37 intercuts using 13 different takes until the performance was actually right. That would only be possible with digital, because back in the day, those would actually all have to be physically done splice edits, and you'd hear them all.
Oh.
So, you get it perfect, but sometimes I wonder if it's too perfect.
You want to hear a comical story that'll make you want to shoot yourself? Back a long time ago, when you guys know the history of this stuff, when did Spring Break come out?
83?
83.
Yeah.
Right. So in 83, I did this movie Spring Break, and
Don't not 100%, but pretty sure.
It's 83.
early 80s.
Oh, I get a cookie.
All right, good. You get a cookie. And so anyway, they had put all these songs in, and one of them I had to re-record. So I checked the click and stuff, and I went into the studio, got my players, and bang, we re-recorded this. Sounded fantastic. So I go to put the music into the film, and it's not even close. I mean, it's going all over the place in this film. I'm going, what is going on? And I said, what's going on? And they said, well, we cut the picture to the song. And I said, well, where did you get the song? And they said, oh, we took it off this cassette tape. And I said, you took it off a cassette tape. You recorded from some Montgomery Ward Silvertone cassette tape, put it on mag, and then just cut your picture as if, and I said, it's all over the place. I had to go and make 4 copies, like 2 ticks slower, and 4 copies 2 ticks faster. So I had 9 copies of the film, of the score running. And then like every 3 bars, I had to go, oh, we got to slow down. Oh, we got to speed up. Oh, we got to slow down. This is what happens when somebody gets a cool idea before technology exists. Now now you find out that they've sped it up. And of course, they didn't realize it's now sort of like 3/4 of a half step higher in pitch than the original one, and then you can't even make the cross cut there. So anyway, just a little painful memory of what you were talking about. It just came to me. I'm sorry. I'll put my clown nose on. Okay. All right.
Now, just I'm cutting through all the techno babble. Is just you know, the bottom line is that a lot goes into this thing. So it's not like we just open a door. There's a configuration of session tapes. We transfer, digitize it, master it, and we're done. A lot goes into this.
So is it the norm with La La Land that you do work closely with the composers whenever possible when you're doing a release? And
certainly.
if so,
oh, sure. That's always, you know, that's always where you want to start, you know, and you hope that you can do that.
Dan is working with several composers right now on what, 5 different projects that we got gearing up, and Mike, you know, is always working with the Williams camp or the Horner Estates, you know, or anything else that we're doing. I mean, it's you know, it's a necessity.
I think the general rule of thumb is if you can involve the composer and they're known to be supportive of the progress of the project, then you want to work with them. It's not always the case, but generally, I think you want to work with the composer because it's their music.
Yeah.
Do you have any example that you're free to talk about where there might have been some tension between what you wanted to do with the release and the composer?
I wouldn't say it's.
I disavow anything that he said.
I wouldn't say tension as much as sometimes it's an education process, because you might be dealing with, you know, and I'm sure Mike Matessino and others can attest to this. You might be dealing with somebody that is used to the listening experience of a soundtrack album done a certain way as a listening experience. And sometimes when we want to do these expansions, these remasters, it's a bit of an education process to say, we're not looking to nullify that experience. In fact, most times we'll include it. We'll include it on the second disc or whatever it is. But it's more kind of, to Joe's point too, an archival thing. It's let's remaster everything for posterity and for history so that it's available and that it exists in a brand new master. And I think sometimes when a composer sees that evolution, they get a little more in sync with it.
And there was,
and I have to say, you know, it's been very helpful for us to actually have John Williams come on board, and with thanks to Mike Matessino, because when you have John Williams okay with this stuff, all the other composers are like, well, if John said you can do this with E.T. and Close Encounters and Harry Potter, yeah, you can. I'm okay. I'm okay with that. You know, if he's good with the expansions, I'm okay with it. So it's helped us. I would say in the last 5 or 6 years more so than anything else, working with Mike and the Williams camp, expanding these classic scores.
There was a project we did years ago before the Williams camp really helped push things. And I'm not going to get into the details of it, but the composer wanted to be involved and kind of bogarted the entire project. And what could have been this very full release of 79 and a half minutes, like pushing the edges of the CD, ended up basically being a slightly re-edited version of the original 35-minute album, because the composer wanted to cut it down to what they wanted. And so ever since then, it's their prerogative, but it's
the nature of the thing. That's why sometimes when fans or customers will ask, well, how come this? How come that? There's so many aspects of the process. Any one of them can dictate part of how the final result ends up.
Yeah.
You got all kinds of legal issues and publishing issues and composers and what the elements are, what exists, what doesn't. Oh, great, we had this piece of music, but the studio never got a contract on this piece of music, so now it can't be there. Anything can happen.
Yeah. Or there have been a few occasions where we go ahead and we start working on a project and we involve the composer, and they're like, La La Land Records, you guys aren't Sony, you're not Universal, you're not Warner's. Why do I want to work with you guys? And then sometimes the project is killed because of that.
Right.
Also,
thankfully,
quality.
What was that, Joe?
I was just.
Go ahead, Matt.
No, I was just saying it. having been around now for 18 years, that's a little bit easier than it used to be, because we can turn around and say, we've done the CD album for, Mission Impossible Rogue Nation. So please, but it took a while to get there.
I was just going to say there's also a fickle quality with audiences, because they want the film version sometimes, but then they don't. Like, no one really wants to listen to the main title to Superman the movie the way it actually is in the movie, entirely the way it is in the movie, because there's these edits that are put into it, and it was also slightly sped up to fit the film. But what they want is sort of this idealized, and Michael, I thought, handled it perfectly, to make an idealized assembly of the elements that were used to create the opening of Superman the movie, but without putting the little edits in or speeding it up to fit the film.
Right, it's just a matter of, sort of honoring your memory without dishonoring the composer's intention.
So maybe some of you can speak to, what makes La La Land sort of stand out in the world of soundtrack production. Like, I know some of you have experience with art direction, and Jeff writes the liner notes. I'd be interested to hear Jeff actually talk a little bit about what the process is for like researching some of these soundtracks and providing detailed notes and that sort of thing.
Well, right now there's a great resource called the internet, which I'm limited to. There is a great place called the Margaret Herrick Library, the Motion Picture Academy Library. That's a fantastic resource. They actually have all of, or a huge amount of Jerry Goldsmith's handwritten scores to almost all the major movies that he did, and under good circumstances, I can get down there and get a lot of research. My process is I go back and look at the movie. Often I've already seen it and sort of have an attitude about it. And then reviewing it, I can kind of adjust that and see what maybe I hadn't noticed before. I just watch it without taking any notes usually. Once, and then Neil or whoever is helping doing the production often supplies me with cue sheets from the studios, which are a very mixed bag of in terms of their helpfulness. They usually tell you in chronological order what cues play in the movie. They're not always completely accurate, and the best ones, I did one a few years ago that just tells you everything that's going on in every cue, so you almost don't have to watch the movie. And I wish that happened every time. Not that I don't love watching the movies; it's part of the fun. But a lot of times you get almost no information with the cue sheet. It will give you a rough idea what's playing, but there might be a lot of differences. So I'll watch the movie another time to note what's happening while all the cues are playing. And I used to do, something called track by track, where we'd list every cue and do a whole breakdown of what's playing. Now it became, for one thing, it made me ludicrously overwrite to the point where I think people got incredibly sick of what I was doing. And also because of what we were doing with a lot of the albums, where we were presenting so many alternates and pieces of source music. So you weren't, you would have to go through, describe what's happening with all the cues while they're playing in the movie, and then get additional information about, well, why was this cue maybe not used in the movie? How is this cue edited differently? And it just wound up becoming a giant mess. So I try to condense all that information now into more of an essay. And I'll have to watch the movie usually at least a third or fourth time to kind of break down how the music's actually being used. What's the relationship between different themes? Are different themes being applied to, specific characters or ideas in the movie? That's something that I find some of the most fun, and because I'm not a composer, as is often pointed out to me, I look at these. I look at the work on a more like kind of conceptual level, dramatically. How does the music work? And it's actually, I think, helpful for me in communicating to an audience, because 90% of the people who buy the CDs are not musicians. They're not buying and looking at the booklets necessarily to get, you know, strict music analysis, but they might be interested in, you know, what the composer's history was, how he usually approached different kinds of subject matter, what kind of, you know, techniques, devices, or effects he might use from score to score, and just how he approached drama, what his music did to make the movie more effective. So I love doing it because it's you know, just an excuse to write about film. You're not just writing about music, you're writing about the history of film and how music and filmmaking changes over the years, what's different now than it would have been done maybe in the 1960s. And then to the extent that I get involved in production, I'd say it's often more as like, I on a lot of things like Star Trek and the Irwin Allen releases, I wouldn't describe myself as an authority on any of that, but I think I come from a fan's perspective, and like on some of these things I can point out, okay, this is what fans would want to hear. There's this piece of music, we have to include this because this, you know, maybe this was tracked so often throughout the show, or it signified something specific to fans. So I think I bring that perspective in terms of production. I am not like, you know, when I'm credited as a producer, it's very much of an honorary title compared to what, you know, Mike and Neil do, where they are very much into the nuts and bolts and, you know, the depth of breaking down all the materials that we have and organizing them. And after they've done all that incredible work, then I'm kind of listening to a lot of the assembled music and giving my perspective then, and you know, whether they're going to listen to my suggestions or not is often up to them. But I'm flattered that I get some kind of input into these things, because so many of the projects that I've worked on, especially for La La Land, have been things that I literally wanted since I was a little kid. You know, I wanted all the music to Star Trek. I wanted all the music to Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea and Johnny Quest, all those shows that were going on at Planet of the Apes. You know, we finally were able to do, you know, Planet of the Apes the way I remembered it sounding in the film. After that, it had a few different versions put out. It's really, to me, it's an incredible gift to be able to work on all these projects, because it's something I would have run out, you know, to a store and bought the second it came out if I hadn't had a chance to work on it.
I need to correct one thing Jeff said, though, or maybe two things. You're definitely the authority on Irwin Allen, so don't sell yourself short on that, because you wrote the book.
Yeah, you literally wrote the book.
Literally wrote the book. And
that's what I was going to point out.
And amazing.
I just remember, though, you know, making some stupid misstatement about, you know, Star Trek like 10 years ago, and Mike Mendocino saying, "Well, you did write the book on it." So that's why I don't like to go around saying I'm an authority on things. There's always something more to learn.
Right. And also, Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea is like half me, half Jeff.
Yeah, that's one where you know, I got to really sequence that, and I've done that with a few other releases, and that is really fun, where you're actually picking and choosing what's going to go on and what order things are going to go on. Although of course, that's not entirely up to us. We have to do Irwin Allen TV show releases all in broadcast order, so there's a lot of things you have to pay attention to, but yeah, it's tremendously fun to kind of pick and choose music that I specifically want to be on a release.
And it depends on which elements have survived too.
Yeah, exactly. On Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, you know, we started Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, And they were like, well, we don't have anything from the first year. And in fact, not only that, but because there had been a release of some music, put out in like 1995, and they had pulled the scores, the whole scores from those releases, even though they had not put all the music on that release. And so initially we were missing a lot of that and had to, track down that, figure out where that was. I mean, we're working on another release right now, which I won't name, but where we started to do it, we're all excited, and then the studio literally says, we have nothing from that. We have absolutely nothing. And it was,
Good luck.
It was like, well, that's so much for that idea. And then I think like 2 weeks later, they had found everything, like every note of recorded music for the series. So it constantly amazes me that any of this stuff does exist. And as fans, someone mentioned at the very beginning of this, like, bootlegs, which we're sort of not supposed to talk about. And, if you're a fan of this stuff, when you grew up, you were sticking a microphone in front of your television, trying to get a mono, terrible recording of that, and you would listen to it on a cassette over and over again, or you would buy, these overseas, like European bootlegs that like wouldn't include the main title of some great score, and all would sound absolutely horrific. And you'd be so excited, it would be missing just all the most important elements of the score, like sometimes you'd like have a main title without the melody, because that was done by a singer or something. So, nutcase fans like us have been, so spoiled now, where we get scores that we thought we would never ever be able to hear in incredible sound, better than we would have ever experienced them, and it's really a golden age for it, the amount of stuff that's come out in the last 10 years, and that is still coming out, continually blows my mind.
I don't think you mentioned, Jeff, actually, because you're probably not the person to say it about yourself, but the effort that has to go into distilling the information, which is sometimes incredibly complicated, especially when you're talking about a television series, so that it's digestible to the reader, but it's also there for posterity. And that's what you've worked tirelessly on doing. And sometimes it can be very difficult. It gets so much full of gobbledygook to explain what has happened to the music over the course of a production, but to actually be able to distill it and get it into a form where you can actually read about it, and someone who knows nothing about it can come away and learn something. That's not an easy thing to do, and you do it great.
Thanks.
I just wanted to say real quick, Jeff, my favorite story of yours is because, you're such a fan of genre stuff that somebody got you a book, a Star Trek book for a holiday or a gift because they knew you liked Star Trek, and you were like, yeah, look who wrote it. And it was a book.
Yeah, my sister did that. That's probably our greatest family Christmas story now.
I never heard that story.
I never either. That's great.
So maybe Dan, do you want to talk a little bit about what the art direction process is like for these releases?
Yeah, I mean, it varies, again, on project to project. Some titles, the studio will have a plethora of imagery to pull from. And other times you're really scraping whatever you can find. It's always going to be, for me, I try to aspire to whatever Jim Titus, who does a lot of the artwork for some of the bigger titles of La La Land, he's like the gold standard, I think. And so I'm always trying to catch up to whatever he's doing on technique basis and, aesthetics and things like that. Also try to look at the film itself, see what they did, because they had marketing departments working hard to put the film out. So, that sort of work drives my initial idea, and then I go from there and look at the film, what titles they use, fonts, color, design elements, things like that. Probably the most interesting thing I worked on, a lot of different things, but the Planet of the Apes box set last year was really, it was a big project. And I know Jeff did an amazing job with basically writing a new book on top of the book he already wrote. for this specific release. And we'd already done One Apes album before, which was the TV series. And knowing that Jim Titus, oh, sorry, go ahead.
You did the Elfman one as well.
Correct. Yes. Sorry. But in terms of the old apes, I guess.
Yes.
And Jim Titus did the artwork on the TV series one, and I actually worked with him to get his assets from a design perspective so that you could literally hold up this box set and the work he did on the TV series years earlier, and it would all feel relatively cohesive as a larger set. So if we're ever able to do more apes, then at least we know we can keep things in order. But really, it's a matter of just getting whatever you can and then trying to figure out what works best from a presentation standpoint.
And Michael and I, we like that consistency when we can get it. So like Mark Banning kind of does a great job on the X-Files and the Star Trek releases, you know, that they all sort of have an identifiable kind of
uniform look. Yeah,
look to them. Yeah.
Dan did the artwork for an album he also we produced. It was a Galaxy Quest. And when we did Galaxy Quest, I said, take a look at what Film Score Monthly is doing with their Star Trek albums and make your art, let's have the art direction sort of look like a Star Trek album without necessarily being a Star Trek album.
Right. Yeah, that was my Joe Sikoriak artwork for
That's
for
right.
Galaxy Quest.
Joe did did the great production design, art design on the Trek TV set and our Lost in Space set. I mean, we just been
hundreds with
really lucky to work with, and done all the introductory, just really lucky to work with such great designers like Dan and everybody else we've been talking about, and all the writers too. Randall Larson, and John Burlingame and John Takis and Brian Satterwhite and all these guys.
And Schweiger, these guys are great writers.
Yeah. The biggest challenge with artwork, and it depends on the writer as well, is going to be how do you fit all of their words into a 24-page booklet and still have room for photos.
That's why you have to break the wall so you can edit it.
Yeah,
that's right. Occasionally the broadswords have to be taken out.
Yes. If there's a way of presenting the unedited liner notes as like a digital download or something, I think the writers might be a little more.
Please stop talking.
All right.
Dan, the recent ones that you've done, the Planet of the Apes series particularly, and also The Bride of Frankenstein, was just, those were ones where everything just sort of came together. We had terrific art, the terrific notes, terrific people involved, and they just were just beautiful releases that you did fantastic job on.
Yeah, it's been a dream working with Universal on the newly revised Classics collection. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Previously the Heritage Collection, now known as the Classics Collection. We've done close to half a dozen of those so far, including Bride of Frankenstein.
We done 9. We just did our 9th one.
Is it the 9th one? Yeah. So Airport 77, Fletch Lives. We've got some great stuff.
Mystery Men.
That's right, Mystery Men. So it's
Two Mules for Sister Sarah.
2 Mules for Sister Sarah. Yeah.
Came out like 2 days after Morricone left us, unfortunately.
Yes.
Yeah, that was really shocking.
Yeah. That was a downer. Sorry.
Thanks, Dan.
Sometimes we have to be creative too. So, like on our Escape to Danger project that we did together,
right?
Music I had written for audio dramas for Doctor Who. And I am able to retain the ownership of the music itself, but the release, was not an authorized release, of the BBC and Doctor Who, the TV show. So we wanted to convey to the audience what this music was intended for without violating any intellectual property. Not to deceive the audience or to pull a fast one, but just because we wanted to make the music available within the legal framework that we were allowed to. So it was an interesting challenge for Mark Banning to make, a booklet and an art direction for the project that felt like the property that the music had been written for without infringing on the copy.
Well, we had that problem actually with Harry. Not Harry's fault, but with
Harry, what'd you do?
With Friday the 13th, the game. We had the artwork. I mean, you want to talk about that one? Was done, and for whatever legal reasons, it basically had to be sanitized to just nothing. So,
and that was one of those legal quagmire kind of things where it's sort of like the music belongs to this person, the images belong to this person, and the IP belongs to this person, and it was it got worked out in the end. But
I still miss the box. I really do.
Yeah,
that was incredible.
I really miss the box. I thought that just that white box just set it off. So it was just artistic. It was amazing.
Yeah.
That's totally inside.
It would have sold us at least 10 more thousand units, man.
Oh yeah, man. The box.
It was one of the few times, and it's no embellishment, that you were signing those box sets at a signing, and there literally were some fans who were basically crying.
No.
He's wanted this for so long.
No, Harry's referring to the box that was on the.
Remember the white box where it said
that yeah. Oh my God.
We want a white box around.
There's a whole
on the title.
There's a whole.
No, that's the box I'm talking about.
Yeah. No, see, the box you're talking about, I want to vanquish from my memory forever.
Well,
so I defaulted back to the other box.
You have
one of those art direction things that just makes you scratch your head. You're like, whoa, what's
there's a lot of stories on that subject, but I don't want to revisit.
Yeah, but yeah.
I remember him, art direction. He was a really. Anyway.
That white box.
Yeah.
Well, on the topic of boxes and art direction and including materials, like vinyl's making a big resurgence these days, right? And so many fans love the art on the big box, and you can have larger booklets and photos and everything. I noticed that you guys don't do a whole lot of vinyl. Do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Well, there's a lot of labels that are already there.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. No, just a lot of labels are already doing that.
Yeah.
We have a fan base that's really sort of set in what they like to buy. I mean, we do them on occasion when it makes sense. They're very expensive to do. The runs tend to not be very large.
And they tend not to sell very well.
Yeah, our experience, for whatever reason, is not, and we're very proud of the vinyls we've done, from Body Snatchers to Star Trek the Motion Picture, which did sell very well. To the Orville, but we for whatever reason they don't seem to move with our customers as much. And there's so whether it's Waxworks or Mondo, there's so many labels that do such great vinyls, but we will we step out once in a while with them.
And so for something like you mentioned Waxworks, who put out the original Friday the 13th score on vinyl. Was that your production and you license it to them, or how does that work?
Well, that sort of segues into sort of Day of the Dead and Creepshow. We've actually worked in tandem with them. We worked on those masters together. When John Harrison found the additional material, he found when we originally released Creepshow and for Numenorian did Day of the Dead, those were sort of LP remasters. That was the only stuff that existed.
And off the M&E tracks.
Right, and then John Harrison found his masters to both films. So we worked in conjunction with Waxwork, and we split the cost of the master, and they did the vinyl, and we did the CDs, and it's sort of been that way with the Friday the 13th too.
And a handful of other ones that we've done too.
That's right.
And a couple with Mondo as well. Yep. My biggest gripe with vinyl is as a fan, I don't like them. It's big. They're bulky. They're fragile. They take up too much room. I pretty much hate everything about them with the exception of the artwork because it's beautiful. But and also I find that the sound quality is inferior. I don't care what anyone says. There's an ant farts on it, and all of a sudden you have a tick and a pop every single time you listen to it. I hate
we've sort of come full circle too, because we do the conventions as well, and we're starting to get customers who are buying CDs to replace their vinyls because now they have no more room in their collection or whatever it is. So these things I think kind of go in waves. but you know, we're proud of the ones we've done, but yeah, for some reason they don't move.
The other part of this, which is the production of it, because you have to book your pressing way in advance, so you have to kind of know what you're doing months out and hand over money.
Right.
But but then we go through this process of the test of things.
Right.
And make sure that they're all entirely good, which involves us.
Right. So when you're a company that's actually focused on vinyl, I think it makes more sense. When you're like us and we're trying to do 40 CD releases and we're throwing a few vinyls in the mix, it just gets crazy. It messes with the whole production schedule.
And from the technical side, you know, when we finish something digitally and it's mastered, that's what it sounds like. I listen to it, it sounds good, off it goes. With the vinyl, we have to go through multiple test pressings until we sign off on it. And like, I didn't have time to listen to Saving Private Ryan 6 times. But it's like the CD master, is done, it's off to the plant, and we're finished. So there's a lot more added time, although I do agree that having the beautiful art is
that being said, we got great vinyls on E.T., Saving Private Ryan, and the Orville, so they're there for the picking. Come get them. We're really proud of them.
There's something else to be said about it, because a lot of you know, the reason, you know, I think a lot of La La Land success comes from is adding extra music. So now let's say you have a score like The World Is Not Enough, which is over 90 minutes long, and somebody's like, hey, put that on vinyl. You're like, well, how do you conveniently put out a 90-minute score? You'd have to go to a third platter. It just, at that point, you're looking at like an opera box to put out.
Right,
you know,
and are you only going to sell 1,000? You know, it all factors in.
The amount of production that would go into it. Now, look, I like vinyl. I like music, and I'll listen to it on any format that, you know, I think is, you know, good, as long as I can listen to the music. But from a practicality standpoint, it doesn't make any sense to put out a full 90-minute score, 120-minute score. You're like, how are you going to do that? That's got to go to multiple platters. And
well, that was the challenge with the Orville, was taking a 2 CD set and cutting it down to effectively a 1 CD assembly, because that would be the vinyl, and getting everyone to sign off on it. And actually, I wanted to ask, maybe you guys can chime in about, given the COVID situation where we are now, we're all working remotely, everyone's kind of in their own little areas, how manufacturing has been affected by that. And because you talk about the turnaround time for vinyl, and I'm curious, you know, CD-wise.
The turnaround time for the CDs is delayed. I can't imagine what it is for vinyl. Yeah, we're seeing delays across the board on everything.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, with vinyl, it usually would be, what, 4 to 6 months?
Yeah, when it's busy.
Yeah. And what I always loved about doing vinyl is like, hey, give us, you know, this giant chunk of money, and in maybe 3 or 4 months, you might see your product.
Yeah, there's so much demand for manufacturing, you would have to pay for the whole run at time of estimate before they even start. Yeah. So that's what I was getting to before. If you're doing, you know, 30 to 40 CD releases for the year, that greatly impacts, you know, we're not Universal Music Group. So, you know, revenue is what it is. So you got to balance it all out with all the productions that you have being produced, and then try and figure out where you can find the money to pay the, you know, for the full 1,500 double platter, whatever vinyl it is, up front before you even start. And you're not going to see that for months and months.
Yeah. I mean, it would certainly, you know, with our budgets, it would certainly affect, you know, what we do. You know, if we have to set aside a chunk of change so we can manufacture and sell 1,000 vinyls and maybe make a profit of $5,000, whereas, you know, we can do at least 2, maybe 3 CD projects and make a profit of 4 or 5 times that much in the same amount of time. What to us, it's like, what's the point in doing vinyl? I would rather do 5,000 copies of E.T. on CD as opposed to 1,000 copies on LP, because as has happened, we sold out of those 5,000 copies of E.T. like that. We're still sitting on several hundred copies of E.T. on vinyl,
which is only a run of 1,000.
Yeah,
So
it's
that's right there.
I think that the labels that specialize in vinyl, they've sort of identified and know how to reach a specific market that buys vinyl.
Well, plus they're going to do 20 vinyls a year. So, you know, if they make a profit of anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 on each one, that's their business model. That's what they do.
Well, also, if I might add, back in the day, even before we started really, playing in this pool, you would have limited edition CDs come out and sell out within 24 hours.
Right.
And
so it's a different universe now.
Yeah. To the secondary marketplace for collectors, and they would jack up the prices on eBay and such. That's what you're finding now with, stuff from Mondo and
right.
You're having the collector marketplace buy these up real quick as soon as they're released, and then go ahead and then they'll sell it on the secondary marketplace at twice the price. CDs stopped doing that quite a while ago when companies like Entrada and Film Score Monthly just decided not to do limited edition batches or up the amount as to what they were doing.
Right.
Instead of 3,000 units, because the AFM rules changed, so you can do 5,000 units, sometimes even 10,000 units, like we did on Star Trek. The motion picture. So, I think that's what you're seeing now with the LP marketplace, and that's why some of them sell out so quickly, is because of the collector marketplace. You have, scalpers basically just going on there and buying multiple copies and then, jacking up the prices on eBay a couple weeks later.
And the part of that bothers me is that the people who are really passionate about a particular title sometimes get shut out and can't get it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's frustrating because I'm a fan myself. And, while I'm not going to go out and buy a vinyl, if I would have, it would piss me off knowing that this thing's, been sold out within 20 minutes.
Right.
And as a creator, I had a vinyl, we were going to do a vinyl with a company for Hitler and Bigfoot, which you knew about that when we made the deal for Hitler and Bigfoot.
Right.
But it got shut down, and I actually think it got shut down because the people thought, well, it's not going to scalp for very much. They're used to selling out now in the first day because for the scalping market, you know what I mean? And
right.
They just thought it'll just be only regular people will want it, and so it won't sell as well.
Well, I mean, and that goes back to what I was saying earlier about we're at the end of the day, we're still a business, so we have to look at the bottom line. We have to look at exactly what we're going to sell, and if we're going to only make $5,000 profit on a release on LP, what's the point? There is no point. So if another company wants to do it, fine, so be it.
Yeah. If we had the ability, if it wasn't an issue on budgets, and you had, I'm sure we do all kinds of cool stuff.
Not only that,
I didn't mean it like that. I just thought it was funny that the project got
Oh no, I know what you mean. Yeah,
because the label had a feeling that it wouldn't become sort of a hot ticket item on the secondary market.
Right.
They're looking at the sort of scalping that happens with these things as a impetus to release something. So
yeah.
Oh, Joe, you went mute.
Joe got muted.
Oh, there. I was just saying that.
You're being censored.
We're being. We
are
are almost out of time. Actually, we should wrap up in about 6 minutes. But on this issue of limited editions, because you have done some, like the 1300 Friday the 13th box. It's cool to have that number. But I mean, how fast did that sell out? Do you wish that had
72 hours or something? Right. It was nuts.
I think it was
a couple of days.
I want to say it was less than 2 days.
We had a couple days because we did the screening at the Vista movie theater, which was really cool, and we did the signing the day after, and I think we were done, right? By the time we did the signing, we were probably done.
We were done, and since then we have actually released them all separately. Because we didn't want to have the fans miss out on it, and B, we just like hanging out with Harry as much as possible.
This is true.
So any opportunity
very true
get to work with Harry, we take advantage of it. So see, it is unfortunate because we do get emails from fans all the time saying, hey, I really wanted to buy E.T., for instance. Well, E.T. was around for at least 2 years, if I'm not mistaken, 1,000 units, 2 years. So, I mean, that's a fair amount of time. But back in the day, sometimes things would sell out within 24 hours. When we did Airplane, 2,000 units. It was the first big title to come out of Paramount, which was a studio that was pretty much locked for the longest time from all the other labels. We sold out of that within 24 hours, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, Commando as well, the first time.
Commando was another one, yeah. When we reissued that one from the Perez release, that sold out within 24 hours. Subsequently, we've re-released Commando on CD, which that re-release just recently sold out after, gosh, how many
years?
Yeah, years. So, a total of like, say, 5,000 units have sold on that.
So we're very cognizant of that, and we still like the specialness that comes with the special edition, and obviously, or the limited edition, and of course, there's the union obligations tied to that and everything else. But I mean, if fans jump on a title in a reasonable amount of time, they have the ability to get it. So. E.T. was around for what, a year and a half or so, a couple years. So we feel like, there's enough time these days. If people really want it and they're on it, stay on our socials, check out our website, you'll get it.
In the last, I would say 5 years, the quickest sellout we've had on a title was the Paramount Western box set, which we released. Was it last
it was last Black Friday.
Yeah, it was the last Black Friday release, because we do a big batch at the end of the year, and that took about 7 months to sell out 1,000 units.
Of 1,000, right?
And honestly, nowadays that's unheard of. But that was like the last title that could sell out in less than a year that we've released. We've released amazing stuff at 1,000 units. Sliver, Howard Shore's Sliver, for instance, came out a couple months ago, and it's done well, but we're not going to sell 1,000 units within a year. And that's Howard Shore, and it's a well-known movie, not a very good one, but it's a well-known movie, and it's actually a really good score.
That's a really good score. I mean, we're
So yeah, the marketplace has certainly changed, but and the other factor is we have people ask us all the time, why did you release this for the 10th time? Well, it's because there's more than just you out there that are fans. If we can re-release things over and over again, why not? Because
our customers have proven to us, especially if it can be an improvement sonically. If there's new source material that new masters made from, we've done a few. I think Home Alone was a good test, right, Mike?
Oh yeah.
But we reissued Home Alone as a remaster, better sound, and we were surprised at how successful that was. So that really kind of opened the doors to us going, well, like ourselves, because is it something that we would buy, I think, too, for Michael and myself, or MV and myself? Is it something we would buy? Yeah, the improvement is that good that we would buy it ourselves. And that seems to have been proven out.
A running gag Matt and I always had was, how many different versions of Army of Darkness do we own on DVD?
Yeah, come on.
So it's
I would say there are also titles that is just a prestige or keep them in your catalog. Like, for example,
absolutely,
the 1951, The Day the Earth Stood Still.
Yeah.
Because when we had that transition from Fox being purchased by Disney, who knew when there would be another edition of that? And that even though we didn't have to change it sonically from the sold out Kritzerland release, we managed to take all the previous liner notes from every single preceding release, put them all together, and make one definitive version that you guys now have in your catalog. Arguably one of the most influential scores ever written is now available, because we don't really know what its fate would be if you hadn't done that.
Certainly.
Cool.
And I remember you did a reissue. You did Die Hard, and then it sold out. So you put Die Hard out again, and like a year after that, we did.
And then we did
getting better stuff.
Set of Die Hard. And that's a great catalog title, and that's why we keep it in. Big Trouble in Little China, Die Hard, Commando recently, X-Files, Batman the Animated Series. There are certain titles that are going to sell, whether they were released 10 years ago or they're released now. New fans always pop up too. That's the thing.
Yeah.
It's there's another generation, so it always makes me, I don't know, cringe when people complain when we re-release something, because it's like there's more than just you out there.
Yeah. Well, plus too, if you were first in line, I mean, if you got one of those
scores,
if you got one of those Friday the 13th box sets, that's the only time in the universe it ever existed as a box set, with the slipcase, with Brian Satterwhite's great notes and all that. So there's still,
something special about it.
There's still something special about it,
Yeah.
But you're going to do a new one, right?
Yeah.
For those of us that didn't get it?
Yeah. Yeah, for the 40th anniversary. We should have done it this year, as a matter of fact.
The white box, though, right, Harry?
The white box, yes.
Yeah, with the white box around the Friday the 13th title.
So I think we're going to have to cut it here, but is there any sort of anything you can announce maybe that's on the horizon that people can get excited about to close things out?
Yeah, we are doing Monsters Go Home. That is coming out in September. We worked very hard with the Jack Marshall estate. His son Frank Marshall, the incredibly famous director and producer, has been working with us on all the Amblin titles, and his father, an amazing composer, and in his own right, has never been really well represented on CD, with the exception of the Jack Marshall collection. We released Thunder Road with MGM a few years back. And Monsters Go Home is coming out in September. We're very happy that that's going to be the first in the newly redesigned Universal Classics collection that we've been working with Universal Studios. That'll be out September 15th, along with Quinn Martin, Volume 3, which features the music of Streets of San Francisco by the great Patrick Williams.
Oh, yeah.
And then Dan produced with John Ottman, I'm sorry, John Powell, Forces of Nature, which is the Ben Affleck, Sandra Bullock movie. And that also will be out on September 15th. So we're really excited about all three of those releases.
Yeah, that's a cool batch.
It's a very diverse batch, and that's what we do. We'll do something. We'll do a 70s cop show. We'll do a Monsters movie, and then we'll do a Ben Affleck rom-com. So that's coming up, and then we've got some really exciting stuff coming up. Hopefully for the end of the year. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah.
Because we can't really tell nowadays.
As usual, when we get to this time of year, we're trying.
Oh yeah, we got some anniversaries we're trying to hit.
We have one approved for the end of the year.
Oh yes, we do have one.
Yes, we do.
One is approved.
Yes, and one almost done, which I know fans have been waiting for a very long time. So maybe 2 of the 5 planned for the big batch at the end of the year. But yeah, I mean it's been very difficult to get things approved and moving along.
It's that way normally, so it's only doubly difficult. Every time somebody says, "Well, what are the big holiday releases going to be?" It's like it's pretty much the same answer every year. It's like we don't know, we don't know. We think we know what they might be. We'll see.
I put together release slates in January, and basically by January 10th, you can just throw it out the window. You can't even adhere to it. So,
and it's certainly never on our side. Everybody, here and the folks who aren't here, it's always everybody on our end is sort of on point. It's all the legal aspects and the approval aspects, and just to wrap up, it's like, what happens when you're completely done with a project, it's ready to go, and the studio says, "Oh, we actually on this one we have a policy because this franchise is in development. We're doing a reboot, so we don't want anything out now for a year till after
or a sequel."
Yeah.
So that happens.
Yeah, we're still waiting on Top Gun. How's that?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I mean,
so there's the worst kept pre-announcement secret in history, but that one is sitting there on the aircraft carrier deck.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you.
This has been really enjoyable.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yes.
Thank you,
and good job to the panelists also monitoring the Q&A. I think you got most of those questions answered in text. Some of them came up in the discussion, but that was good multitasking there.
And you can always email us through our website if you have any questions or any comments, concerns, or suggestions of projects we should do.
We listen to the customers all the time and try and do our best. So happy. And thanks for the opportunity.
Can you guys still hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Hey, Harry.
As y'all were talking about things, I just thought of something, and this goes to the Universal re-releases of the classics.
Yes, sir.
I remember watching the Bride of Frankenstein. That's the release you're talking about. If anybody's out there collecting classics, this is something you really should get, because that is a fantastic score. And I remember watching it with the movie, and the thing that Mike did and Dan and all these guys, I saw the movie, I went, oh my God, this sounds and looks so great. And the CD just sounds, I mean, you know, recording isn't what it is not what it is now in those days. So, and what you've made, you made that music sound as great as it's ever going to sound. So
that's all Mike Matessino right there.
I don't know who it is. It's one of these.
It's the guy down there.
Matessino type.
I can't see him right now.
Brady Bunch corner. I don't know.
It was astounding, and I can't tell you. You want to grab a great sounding classic CD.
Thanks, Harry. And that movie just kind of like wrote the textbook on how you score a movie.
Oh my gosh!
The one in Sleepy Hollow and the one here, and both.
I was a mere child when I saw it, but I just, holy smoke! This looks so great, sounds so good, and I said, I would guarantee it didn't look and sound like this, when it first came out. But if you're collecting great classic movies, it's really I was astounded. It's great writing. You could steal a lot. I mean, you can learn a lot from it. Score.
Good. Okay.
All right, everybody, be well, stay safe, stay healthy.
Yeah, stay safe, everybody. Thanks.
Yes.
Thanks. You too.
Stay safe, everyone. Great to see you all.
Hello.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.